I've been a busy bee working on my fall sewing plans, and I have a few things that I would love to share with you. Hi, my name is Sarah, and welcome to my channel, which is all about sewing and styling a handmade wardrobe. I had made 2 fall and winter sewing plans videos earlier, and I've been busy working on those things, and the first one that I want to share with you is the Vicky Sews Jenna blouse. This was a brand ambassador project, so I did receive both the pattern and the fabric for free. All the links will be down in the description box. This fabric is a Minerva Core Range Luxury Viscose Satin. I made the size 36, and I made my normal Vicky Sews adjustments. I shortened the sleeves by 3 inches. I added 1/2 inch to the upper back just to make more room for my broad back. I did move the bust darts down by about 1 1/4 inches. And often with Vicky Sews, I have to do a broad bicep adjustment, but this time I actually did not need to do that because there's plenty of ease in the sleeves. As usual, the instructions for Vicky Sews patterns are very thorough, but I did make a few changes and I ran into an issue which was totally my own fault. The changes that I made were, instead of stitching in the ditch for the collar and the collar stand, I just hand sewed it. Same thing on the cuffs. The pattern indicates that they want you to do French seams, but I personally just don't like doing French seams when the seam allowance is only 1 centimeter. I just feel like that's too narrow. If I had really wanted to do French seams, I would have added to the seam allowance before I cut out the pattern. Since I didn't do that, I just serged my seams instead and pressed them open. The area that I ran into issues was on this little placket here. I did the bias placket without really looking at the instructions. And because I'm American and I'm used to imperial measurements versus metric, I do think that I ended up taking too much of a seam allowance on this placket, and what that meant was that when I went to put the cuff on the sleeve itself was too small to fit into the cuff. But it was a relatively easy fix. All I did was I made the pleats on the sleeve a little bit smaller, and I was able to make up that extra width that I had lost to get the sleeve to fit into the cuff, and it was no big deal. But next time I would definitely pay closer attention to what the seam allowances are supposed to be so that I could get it right next time. Now I do want to talk a little bit about this fabric because it was really tricky to work with and I knew that going in. I pre-washed and dried the fabric like I normally do, and then when it came time to iron and cut out my fabric, I used Best Press and I basically soaked the fabric. I sprayed it on one side and then I flipped it over and sprayed it on the other side. It was very saturated, and then I pressed the fabric. And that just added some body and stability to the fabric so that it would be less shifty when I was cutting out, and that worked really well. So I would highly recommend doing that. You don't have to use Best Press. That's just what I had on hand, but using some kind of starch or stiffener is going to make it easier to cut out and work with the fabric. Now, one thing that I did not do that I really wish that I had is that I should have serged all of the raw edges before I started sewing. I didn't do that, and at some point when I was working on the top, I kind of stopped in the middle and just went ahead and serged the hem before I went back to what I was doing, because I noticed that the hem was really starting to fray, and I was worried if I left it till the end that I wouldn't have any seam allowance left to do the hem. So because this fabric is so prone to fraying, I think that serging all of those seams before I started sewing anything probably would have been best practice. The final thing that I want to say about this fabric is that it does wrinkle. That's just the nature of satin, and especially a viscose satin, it's going to wrinkle. If that's going to bother you, then you probably shouldn't use this fabric. I wore this to work one day and I had ironed it before I put it on, and by the end of the day I looked like a crumpled mess, but that's just the way that it is. Now when I finished this top and I put it on, you know how when you finish something and you try it on and you're all excited, and sometimes it can be a little bit deflating because it doesn't look exactly the way that you thought it would? Well, this was one of those, and I think there were a couple factors playing into that. First of all, this shirt is quite long. It was basically about 2 inches longer than I would really want it to be, and when I tried it on untucked, it just looked really unflattering. I was definitely thinking about going back in and cutting that 2 inches off of the bottom, but I'm actually really glad that I didn't do that. Because this is a satin, it's very, very slippery, obviously. So when you wear it tucked into your pants, it wants to come out. It's basically always like this close to coming untucked. And having that extra length actually helps it stay tucked in so that it doesn't come loose. So I think that the extra length is helpful in that regard, but if I had ever wanted to wear this not tucked in, I definitely would make it shorter, because I just don't think it looks very nice. The other thing about trying on this top that seemed like a disappointment was that it looked kind of like pajamas. I think that because it's this silky fabric and the style of the collar and the fact that it was too long, it looked a little bit sloppy, and I was like, oh, I don't know about this. But I think a key thing to keep in mind for all of us is that you need to style things. Don't just put it on and think of it as a finished product. You actually need to wear it in a way that you would really wear it in real life. So once I tried it on for photos and styled it in an outfit, then I really appreciated the design and the flow of the fabric. It looked so much nicer. And I don't think that ultimately it looks like pajamas. You can let me know in the comments what you think. So I think this is going to be a nice versatile blouse in my closet. It's something that I can wear year round because I can layer it up in the wintertime, but it is lightweight enough that I think that I could wear this in the warmer months, even in the summer if I wanted to. And I absolutely love the color. So I'm really, really happy with how this turned out. And it's always great to get a win when you have an idea in your head and it works out the way that you want it. The next piece that I have to share with you is the Pattern Emporium Slay All Day skirt. Now I am a Pattern Emporium affiliate, so if you use my links, I will get a small commission, but I did buy this pattern with my own money. This pattern is for a knit skirt. It comes in several different options with different lengths. I chose to make the longest length that has a slit in the front, but it's off to the side. I have the narrow waistband with elastic and the high waist version. The fabric that I used is an athletic brushed poly spandex that I got from Surge Fabrics. Now I did switch the fabric that I was thinking about using from my plans video. Originally I had planned to use a bamboo rib knit, but because the seasons were getting colder and colder, I realized that that fabric is really more of a warm weather fabric. I think that it would be too cold to wear in the winter, so I switched to this brushed athletic poly spandex because it is actually quite substantial and warm. And I have worn this to work with tights and boots, and it's definitely a much better choice for the colder weather. Now I picked the size 8 based on the instructions which say to use your hip measurement. But what I didn't account for is that this skirt has negative ease and that I needed to account for my thighs. Now it is not very common for sewing patterns to give you a thigh measurement. Usually they only do it on pants patterns, but typically whenever a pattern does have a thigh measurement listed, my thighs are very normally about 2 to 3 sizes larger than my hips. And so what I think happened was technically my thighs are actually the widest part of my body, and there's just not enough room for them in this skirt. So when I wear it, it does want to ride up right at that thigh area. And it's a little bit annoying because I always have to yank it down. So I can't really fix this skirt, but I think if I made it again in the future, it would be a relatively simple fix. The pattern does have a hip notch indicated on the pattern piece. So I would start at the hip notch, grade out a little bit for my thighs, and then grade back in at the knee. And I think that would take care of the problem. The pattern instructions for this were really good. I liked the way that they had you do the slit. It has a really clean finish. This was a really quick and simple pattern to make, and I really enjoyed making it. I did add some belt loops here because I like to wear belts with my outfits. And I have this problem that because my waist and my hips are not that different in size, if I try to wear a belt on my waist without belt loops, it wants to slide down to my hips and it just looks really bad. So by just adding a few belt loops here, I can keep my belt up on my waist where it belongs. And I do really like the way that it looks with outfits. As I said, I did wear this skirt to work the other week. And other than it riding up a lot and being kind of annoying, I do really like the way that it looked. And I think there's a lot of potential with this in terms of styling and different ways that you can wear it. So I'm really happy with this particular skirt, and I would like to make the pattern again in the future. I do think that I will keep that bamboo rib knit in mind for when the weather gets warmer, and maybe make another version then, because I do think that this fabric is heavy enough that I don't think I'd want to wear this when it's hot out because I think it would be too hot, but a lighter weight version for summer would be really nice. The third piece that I want to share with you is the I Am Patterns Gaston jacket. For this pattern, I used a remnant piece of faux Sherpa fleece that I got from Joann way back in like 2018 or so. I made the size 38, I shortened the sleeves by about 2.5 inches, and I shortened the body of the jacket 4 inches in order to make it more of a cropped fit rather than a hip length jacket. I also made the view without the collar. Now because I've used this fabric before, I knew that it was going to be difficult to work with. I tried out some samples and I tried to get it to go through my serger, but it was just too thick. And so the way that I put this together was I used my regular sewing machine with a ballpoint needle and I used Mara Flex thread. Now I did this weird thing where on some of the seams I didn't do any finishing at all. And then on some of the other edges, like the facing and then on the hems and the sleeves, I did add this binding. I really don't know why I did it halfway. I really should have bound all of the seams, but I guess I was just feeling lazy. And I didn't really think about adding binding until it was time to just do those finishing edges. So what that means is that when I wear this, I do get little gray fuzzies all over whatever I'm wearing. However, having worked with this fabric before, I really think it would probably do that regardless. But at any rate, at least I kind of expected that to happen, and so it is what it is. Now, I've sewn a few patterns from IM Patterns before, and I really like their technical drawings and their instructions. They're very clear and concise, and they don't get too wordy, which I very much appreciate. I know that their size range could be better. I believe this pattern comes in sizes 34 to 52. And I'm not trying to apologize for them, but what I will say is that for a French company, I think that that is a decent size range. A lot of the French pattern companies that I've tried before have an even worse size range. So I feel like that for a French company, they're actually better than a lot of other ones that I've seen, for whatever that's worth. Now, as I had talked about in my plans video, I wanted to put on some toggle closures inspired by a jacket that I had seen from Mango, and I was able to find these leather toggles on Amazon. It took quite a bit of searching because most of the toggle closures that I found didn't have any holes in them to sew them on, so you would have to punch your own holes and then sew them on, and that just seemed like way too much work for me and kind of a recipe for disaster. So I was able to find these that already had pre-punched holes so that you can just sew them onto your fabric. Now, one thing to note that just was kind of funny to me is that these toggle closures were about $30, and the fabric itself, I want to say I paid about $10 for. So these closures ended up costing me 3 times the amount of the actual garment fabric. But that's just how it works sometimes. Now, I wore this jacket yesterday because I took the photos and then I just loved how comfortable it was and I didn't want to take it off, so I just wore it for the rest of the day. I will say that it is extremely warm. Like, I kind of got overheated at some point. I was actually able to wear this as a coat outside. But I know that when winter hits, this will be a perfect layer for cozying up at home. It should keep me nice and warm. Now, there was something about this fabric that I wanted to discuss with you guys, and I would really love to hear your thoughts. So from experience having worked with this fabric before, I know that it is not very high quality and that it's not going to last. I had previously bought this exact same fabric in a pink color and I had made a sweatshirt out of it. And then I had used this fabric to make a vest. And then this was what was left over. And both of those pieces that I had made previously, I want to say that they only lasted for a season or maybe 2 seasons. Because the more that you wear, and especially the more that you wash this, it gets kind of matted and ratty looking. And at some point it just becomes unwearable because it just looks too messy and like really worn out. So I knew going into it that this project is not one that's going to stay in my closet for 5 years. And that's always my goal. Every time I make something new, ideally I would like to have it for at least 5 years. And there's just no way that this is going to make it that far. However, it was a dilemma for me because I had that fabric already in my stash. It's sitting there not being used. It's also wasteful to have fabric and not use it. And if I try to donate it or sell it, then that's just making it someone else's problem to deal with. So I'm really interested to hear what you guys think as far as dealing with that push and pull between using something that you know that's not the best quality, that's not going to last forever, versus just letting it stay in your stash and also taking up space there and also being wasted. For myself, I decided in the end that I would rather make it up into a garment, and even if it's not perfect and it doesn't last forever, I could at least get some enjoyment out of it while it lasts. I do really like the way that this looks, and it is very, very warm and comfortable to wear, even with dealing with all the little gray fuzzies. And I do think that I will get some enjoyment out of it, even if it's not still in my closet in 2024 and beyond. Thank you so much for joining me today, and if you enjoyed seeing these makes, watch this video next.